Okay, we are live, apparently. Yes, we're live. Greetings, one and all, and welcome once again to Tom's Hit Parade Live. Today, this week, I am presenting you with my Spankin Platters video, which, as you guys know, is my quarterly review of my favorite albums that were released over the past 3 months. Well, actually, I'm almost a month late doing this because of the difficulties I mentioned I had on my channel with my camera and whatnot. Yes, the albums from July, August, and September, which floated my boat, tickled my fancy, and otherwise appealed to me. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, I have actually got 7 albums to talk about, so I'm going to pretty much get right into the festivities, so to speak. I don't really have much of anything to talk about new tonight that I didn't talk about already last weekend, except just today at House of Records, I picked up, I guess you could call this a sneak preview of the fall Spankin Platters. I picked up the Lockdown Sessions by Elton John and Duran Duran's new album, Future Past. So really looking forward to hearing these. I haven't broken them out of the cellophane yet, so yes, I will be hearing those pretty soon. So, and as you can see, I still have not yet had a chance to experiment with my OBS software, and I don't have a green screen. I don't have the fancy titles. One thing that's kind of holding me back is I don't have the proper lighting that I think is going to properly help my green screen work. I've only got this one light above me. The light that I was using with my camera does not come down low enough sitting on my desk. It comes down like from way up here, so it doesn't provide good light. I tried it. So I do have, will soon be ordering a replacement light that should light my green screen better. Then I'll be able to possibly spruce up my live streams with a green screen and whatnot. Another thing that's held me is that this will be the 3rd weekend in a row that half of my weekend has basically been used up by other things. 2 weeks ago, tomorrow, my brother and I went up to Portland for the day. Last weekend, I had chores around the house on Saturday that kind of kept me busy all day. And tomorrow, we just made plans a couple of days ago. Going to be going down south, 2.5 hours drive down south, to have lunch with my aunt and uncle. They live down in the southern part of Oregon, and we have not seen them since before the pandemic. So yeah, 2 years we haven't seen them. So yes, we're taking the opportunity. It's going to be a rainy drive, but it should be a fun drive. And to see my aunt and uncle again, love them. They are 2 of my favorite, well, I don't know if aunt and uncle is considered immediate family or not, but yes, 2 of my favorite relatives that are not in my own close, actually immediate family. Let's put it that way. Anyway, I've got a lot of ground to cover here with my Spankin Platters. I've got 7 albums to talk about, as I said, so I'm going to get right into it, and I'm going to be reading my notes because obviously with this kind of video I have to have notes, and I'm going to be doing it. I was going to do it on my tablet. I've got my tablet sitting here, but I think I'm going to try it actually on my PC, so hopefully things will be just fine and dandy and won't mess up. I'll be switching windows, so wish me luck. Hang on 1 second here, sorry. No, I guess I can't get rid of that anyway. Okay, here we go. There's that awkward silence and stuff that comes with live streams. Don't you love it? Anyway, the first album I'm going to talk about is Pink Noise, the 3rd album by Laura Mvula. Now, I first discovered Laura Mvula when she sang guest vocals in a song on the deluxe version of Jamie Cullum's 2013 album Momentum. Jamie Cullum is a British jazz artist. Her first album, Sing to the Moon, came out at about the same time, and that was pretty much all it took. I just fell in love with her music right then and there. Her first 2 albums are kind of Sade meets Angelique Kidjo. I know a lot of you won't get that reference. A mix of jazz with more traditional African-esque elements. But with this album, she has taken her sound in much more of an 80s-inspired direction, with lots of synths, a bigger helping than before of upbeat songs, with danceable grooves. And I could point out some of the sonic influences, but suffice to say that over the course of this album, my musical memory flashed on pretty much every 80s band that regularly used synths in their sound. The singles Church Girl and Got Me are two of my favorites in terms of melody and beats. I like the opening track, Safe Passage, and the later song, What Matters, except that they do sound a little like each other in places. The song Magical and the closing track Before the Dawn have gorgeous, uplifting instrumental swells that just give me goosebumps. Most of the lyrics on the album are about love and relationships in their various facets. The biggest exception is the song Remedy. She's most directly talking about racism in modern day society, but the medical metaphor in the lyrics, talking about remedy, the title of the song, timed with this inescapable COVID pandemic that we've all been dealing with, adds a bit of a double meaning to the song. At least to me, it does. I do get a bit uncomfortable whenever a black artist uses the phrase "I'm a slave," like she does in the song "Got Me." But hey, I guess if she's the one that wrote it, I shouldn't let it upset me. So, but yeah, this album is just excellent, fantastic. I was looking forward to it for weeks before it came out, and yeah, I just absolutely love it. There's a good shot of the cover there. So yeah, fantastic album. Listen to it if you have not yet. I love it. It's probably going to be in my top 5, I would say. Yeah, the running is it's kind of a heated field of competition right now with my top 5 albums. I've got to say, there's been a lot of great stuff this year. Speaking of a lot of great stuff, Donny Osmond with his 18th solo album, Start Again. Now, if I were to tell you that a 63-year-old Mormon white guy put out a contemporary pop R&B album, you'd probably roll your eyes and assume it was an embarrassingly lame, cheesy-sounding dorkfest, right? Well, get ready to have those expectations shot all to hell. Donny Osmond has released one of the best pop albums I've heard in recent memory. Let me say that again. 63-year-old Donny Osmond just dropped one of the best contemporary pop albums that I've heard in years. And thanks in large part to the talented producers he brought in, he pulled it off without any irony or self-parody whatsoever. The R&B sounds remind me a lot of turn of the millennium boy band pop like Backstreet Boys or NSYNC. And if you don't mind that bit of a throwback sound, you're in for a treat, honestly. I heard the first single, Who, when it debuted a couple months ago, and I loved it. It quickly became a recurring earworm in my head, and I had no problem with that. It's definitely one of my favorite songs of the year. I loved it so much that I was worried the rest of the album would be a letdown. But it did not disappoint. There aren't any deep lyrical relevate. Let me try that again. There aren't any deep lyrical revelations. Most of the songs provide inspiration or just want you to have fun. But there are a few love songs in between. But he mostly avoids lyrical cliches too. Emotional Thing, not emotional thing, but a motional thing, as in motion. And Life After Loneliness are my other 2 favorite upbeat songs on here, and the title track as well as Footprints are great ballads. With the perfect balance of up-tempo tracks and ballads and the well-crafted hooks in nearly all the upbeat songs, this is a textbook pop album, and I mean that as a compliment. While I don't expect it to be my favorite album of the year, it was definitely the most pleasantly surprising one. I've got to say, yeah, if you love a good pop album, check out Donny Osmond's album Start Again. I don't think you'll be disappointed, especially if you like, the old boy band pop, and as I said, the turn of the millennium pop like that. It's a fantastic album, gotta say. Yeah, sorry if the album cover is not getting a good look as I'm reading the notes because I can't see what the camera's showing. So anyway, fantastic album. So like all the albums on here. And yeah, that's just 2. Let me get a drink of water first here. And let me say, as I should have said at the beginning of the video, I hope you guys had a good week and are gearing up for a good weekend. It's always important to put a little fun in your life, aside from fun music. Anyway, my next album up for review on my Spankin Platters for summer is Saturday Night, Sunday Morning, the 5th album by Jake Bugg. Now, I'm still not sure how or why I became such a fan of Jake Bugg, because his first couple of albums had a pretty healthy Bob Dylan influence, and that's never been a selling point for me, honestly. But here we are, 5 albums in, and I still look forward to each album he puts out, and I have not been disappointed in any of them yet. Maybe it's because with every album he seems to bring at least a little something new. He probably tried to stretch his sound a little bit too much on his third album, On My One, but if that was his low point, he's come back stronger than ever since then. In fact, this just might be his best album so far. The Dylan influence is still there, as it always has been, but with a bit of a rockabilly twist on the first 2 tracks, All I Need and Kiss Like the Sun. Both have a lively beat accentuated by hand claps. That's not a bad thing in my opinion. He puts his guitar aside for a couple tracks, most strikingly on Lost, which has a distinct EDM feel. That was a sound, by the way, that he did experiment with a little bit on My One, as well as the song Downtown, which is just one of several fine ballads on this album. In fact, the ballads actually might be stronger than the up-tempo tracks on this album. And you know me, it's really something for me to say that because I'm usually glom onto the more upbeat songs than the ballads. The song Scene is probably the most gorgeous song on the album, and the closing track, Hold Tight, has a guitar style that reminds me a lot of Dust in the Wind by Kansas. Speaking of sonic reminders, Maybe It's Today has that classic Brill building beat and those Spectre-esque crescendos that give it a great 60s pop vibe. I mean, this album is, as you can probably tell, is just great all around from front to back. But Jake knows how to rock too. The 3 tracks with probably the highest energy are Rabbit Hole, I love that one, Lonely Hours, and Screaming, which kind of, you can kind of tell by the title it's going to be a high energy song. And those songs are just as fantastic as the quieter moments on this album. And that's one of the best things about Jake Bugg's voice, actually. Even though he basically only has one timbre in his voice, he can somehow do something with it that helps him pull off rockers and ballads equally well. So, yes, as you can tell, I hope I didn't say that with the last album, I love this album. This is almost definitely going to be in my top 5. I can't get enough of this album. I almost did get enough of it in listening to it and writing the notes for the review, so I had to take a break from it for a while. I haven't listened to it in a couple of weeks, but I will be going back to it very soon in very short order. If you are not familiar with Jake Bugg, I urge you to give him a try. Don't go with On My One first, though, but I would say try any of his other albums. You pretty much can't go wrong with Jake Bugg. Excellent, excellent artist. And then, excuse me, coming up next, we have Imagine Dragons with their 5th album, Mercury Act 1. Now, I have a complicated relationship with Imagine Dragons. On the one hand, they made such a first impression on me that I still remember the moment I first saw Night Visions on the CD rack in Walmart. I saw it there and had no idea what this band was, but the name just sounded kind of cool to me, Imagine Dragons. So I picked it up, never having heard a note, and brought it home, and the rest is history. Plus, frontman Dan Reynolds is one of the individual musicians I admire and appreciate the most in the entire world of music, thanks to his fierce moral certitude in support and defense of LGBTQ rights. But by the time of Evolve and Origins, their singles were feeling like self-parody, honestly, with their booming drums, arena-filling vocals, and lyrical platitudes mimicking several of their previous singles. And since those albums seemed to have a little more to offer, I sold them off. And when I saw this album on the horizon, I decided to ignore it. Not that both of those decisions didn't come with a small twinge of guilt. Excuse me. But then Ryan from True North Reviews, a channel I love. If you haven't checked out True North Reviews, check it out. Ryan had to come along and give Mercury Act 1 a moderately positive review. So I thought, okay, I'll stream it, and believe it or not, I was pleasantly surprised by how sonically varied this album is. There's everything from hard-hitting, furious nu metal type songs to sunny, bouncy reggae. One of my favorite tracks, Lonely, reminds me of Sugar Ray in their prime. And I also love the 8-bit electronic minimalism of Monday. That's just another standout for me sonically. Perhaps the most awe-inspiring thing is how dynamic Dan Reynolds' vocals are over the course of this album. I'm complimenting Jake Bugg's voice, and now I'm complimenting Dan Reynolds. Everything from gentle falsettos Yes, I can speak tonight. Everything from gentle falsettos to full-on throat-shredding screaming, which I've mentioned before that I don't normally care for, but is tolerable in how sparingly it's used on this album. And sometimes we get near both extremes in the same song. So yes, this album is just probably the most dynamic album, varying in from one end of the spectrum to the other that I've heard this entire year so far. But that comes with a little caveat here. That's where my biggest gripe comes with this album. The way the tracks are sequenced makes the changes in mood from one song to the next feel pretty jarring in a few places. Unless that was intentional, the album would have benefited from a more gradual transition between extremes. As for the lyrics, the songs Number One and No Time for Toxic People approach what I call the Stuart Smalley factor, heard in past albums, those almost cliched platitudes. But that's as close to that line as this album gets. They're also more direct. The lyrics are also more direct than on past albums, almost simplistic in a couple places, but really there's nothing inherently bad about making your lyrics to the point. So yeah, I've got to say this is all in all a pretty darn solid album, and it's certainly a surprise to me based on what Imagine Dragons had put out from their last two albums. So yes, a very good return to form, pretty much. And yeah, Ryan over at True North Reviews called this album their best since Smoke and Mirrors, and I pretty much have to agree with that. In fact, I have to go back to Smoke and Mirrors and see if this album does not, in fact, one up Smoke and Mirrors. So, but yeah, all in all, a good album. If their last two albums, Evolve and Origins, disappointed you, give a second thought to trying out Mercury Act 1. You might be surprised. And now coming on to the fifth of 7 albums. Yes, we're moving along here. 17 minutes in. I guess I'm probably going to be done quicker than I thought I was going to be. But anyway, excuse me, one more drink of water. Yes. Between every two albums, I should take a drink of water, I think. Coming up for my next album, excuse the crack in the CD jewel case, Sob Rock, the 8th album by John Mayer. Now, I have my sister to thank for turning me on to John Mayer and his guitar skills after she dragged me is really putting it, exaggerating it, to one of the shows during his tour with Sheryl Crow back in 2006. As a result, just as much for his talent as for memories of my sister, I now own all of John Mayer's albums on CD, so I had to pick up this one. And knowing this was his salute to 80s soft rock had me anticipating this album even more. Now, I'm going to be honest, most of the appeal of this album is how it presses my 80s nostalgia buttons. Not unlike Laura Mvula's album, nearly every track on Sob Rock gives me a flashback to any one of a dozen 80s bands, thanks to the synth flourishes, although his guitar does remain fairly prominent, but without any trademark solo jams. So that's the one thing that I missed on this album was John Mayer's great guitar solos. He even puts the guitar aside for one or two tracks and shines the spotlight on the piano, just to shake things up a little bit. Now, lyrically, I'll admit this album does not hold any surprises. John Mayer basically stays in the love song gear throughout. Now, I'm not sure why he went grammatically wonky with the song Why You No Love Me, because to the word nerd in me, it's much more annoying than cute. If I had to pick two favorite songs on the album, though, I'd have to go with Till the Right One Comes and New Light. But the 3 songs that feature Maren Morris on guest vocals are also highlights. Now, people who don't have an attachment to 80s music probably won't think much of this album, since most of the tracks, frankly, are otherwise pretty forgettable. It would have been nice to hear at least a bit of that classic 80s rock staple, the saxophone, in a song or two. I'm a sucker for rock saxophone. I was also a bit disappointed that the label didn't take their 80s marketing campaign all the way by giving the CD release that classic Columbia look with the red block letters on a white plain spine. So I would have loved to have seen that. But hey, that's just a very small nitpick on this album. Otherwise, it's pretty good. I'm not sure if it'll make my top 10 or not. Definitely not my top 5, but honestly, John Mayer's voice is probably the most recognizable thing about him. And his voice is just, it brings back memories of my sister. What can I say? So yes, a solid, dependable album. John Mayer is a dependable artist. I guess that's the best way to put it. So yeah, pretty darn good album. And of course, I really don't need to say that part because all of these are darn good albums. Otherwise, I wouldn't be talking about them here on Spankin Platters. And coming up next, we have a Canadian artist for those of you north of the border, one of whom might be watching right now live. We have Detour de Force, which I love the album title, the 13th album by Barenaked Ladies. Now, I've been trying to figure out why I've never been as much of a BNL fan as I was during the first third-ish of their career thus far. Whether it's just that my music tastes in general have evolved over the years, or just that there are a lot more artists I pay closer attention to now. But I hate to consider the possibility that they might not be as good or as fresh as they used to be. There are always one or two songs on each of their albums that I really enjoy. The standouts in this case being New Disaster, which satirizes how our now 24-hour-a-day news cycle, with the added perversion of corporate sponsorship, has basically desensitized us to all the awful crap going on in the world. And the song Flat Earth, which seems to take a pretty direct jab at Q-believers and conspiracy theorists. Yes, one thing I love about Barenaked Ladies is they always seem to have their humor intact. I have missed Stephen Page sharing lead vocal duties ever since he left, but that hasn't had anything to do with my diminished appreciation for the band. In fact, in a way, I kind of think Ed Robertson is a little bit better vocalist, but that's just me. But I had never cared... Excuse me, a little hiccuping going on. But I had never cared for Kevin Hearn's vocals until this album. I'm not sure if he's gotten better or if it just took this long for his voice to grow on me, but there's a certain ASMR quality to it, I guess you'd say. The three songs he sings lead on here are mostly fluff, although two of them, National Park and Big Backyard, suggest an affinity for nature or the outdoors, which I could certainly get behind. All in all, it's a pretty good effort by the band, I've got to say. I'm not sure it'll make it into my year-end list, but I'm something of a diehard BNL fan, so I couldn't not pick up this CD. So yeah, a very, very good album. There I go, saying very good album again. And you might have noticed, and this is a topic that I want to take on. It might actually be what I'm going to do in next week's video, because I actually haven't decided yet what the topic for next week is going to be. But, and that is, what makes me determine whether I buy a new release on CD or LP? That's the topic that I'd like to address at some point soon. And as you've noticed, every single one of these albums, except the one I'm about to show you, I've bought on CD. And there's a couple of reasons I don't want to go into it in this video. I'll probably go into it in that topical video, discussion video. But anyway, for now, suffice to say, the seventh and last album is the only one in today's selection on LP, and that is Take the Sadness Out of Saturday Night, Bleachers' third album. For those of you who haven't watched my first album diaries video, which I did a couple months ago, Bleachers, aka Jack Antonoff, is an artist who, aside from making excellent music, also has a personal significance to me. My dear friend and Antonoff superstan Noah basically introduced me to their music, and by coincidence, this new album dropped the same week I was visiting him and his fiancée. So for that reason, it has a special meaning to me. I actually picked it up at a store in Tulsa, I believe. Yes. This is actually the indie store exclusive cover variant, by the way. Now, it should come as no surprise then that Titty Susan, as the album is colloquially called, soundtracked a good number of those super fun day trips around Oklahoma. And no, we didn't have a record player in the car. We streamed it on the road trips. Just thought I'd clarify. As a result, I love this album just as much for the memories attached to it as for the music. Or possibly even a little bit more for the memories. Not to say that the music isn't great. Antonoff wouldn't be one of the most in-demand producers and musicians right now, nor would he be able to pull in a guest appearance from someone like Bruce Springsteen if he didn't have serious talent. The Boss helps give that song, Chinatown, an Americana gloss that sets it apart sonically and makes it one of my favorite tracks on the album. For some reason, in the last couple of years, I've gotten a thing for Americana-ish music. I don't know why. Another high point for me is the centerpiece single, Stop Making This Hurt. I love this song, in which Jack shows his uncanny ability to juxtapose melancholy lyrics against a euphoric ear candy melody. I mean, few people can do that as well as deftly as Jack Antonoff. The mostly acoustic 45 is another highlight for me, partly because it was released at the same time as Chinatown and had 8 months to grow on me before the album came out. Two other tracks, Don't Go Dark and Big Life, are also enjoyable for me, perhaps because their sound reminds me of 80s new wave groups like the Cars. I do get a little distracted by how on a few of the tracks, Jack either sounds like he's singing about 20 feet away from the microphone and is on the verge of getting drowned out by the music, or where he sings at almost a whisper. And yes, that kind of whisper singing is just a type of singing that I've never really cared much for. Mostly we've heard it from female artists lately, and yeah, I just have trouble with that. It might be a generational thing, I don't know. But anyway, and I mentioned a few minutes ago how I was lamenting the lack of saxophone on John Mayer's album. Well, I never should have doubted that good old Jack would come through for me. I am a sucker for a good rockin' saxophone, as I said. But anyway, yes, even if this album fails to make my top 5 or top 10, that's not a likely scenario, by the way, just so you know, Noah, I still consider it one of the bright spots in my year. I love Bleachers' debut, Strange Desire, a lot more, but I'd still call this an expertly crafted pop album without a doubt. So yes, just another great, great album, I've got to say. In a list of great albums for today, I can't believe I got through that list so quickly. It's not even a half hour in. What am I going to do for the rest of the hour? I don't know. I don't have the notes prepared for that discussion video. Well, hey, let me look for them. Hang on. Why not make it a 2 topics in 1 video, right? Please stand by. Hopefully I'm not getting a lag from accessing something other than YouTube. Hang on a second here. There we go. There it is. I had to find it. And now I have to wait for Adobe Reader to come up. There we go. So anyway, so yes, let's go ahead and get, I might as well go ahead and launch into this topic too. It won't take nearly as long as Spankin Platters, and I like to fill out the hour as much as I can. But anyways, thinking back on my Spankin Platters videos, I don't have to think back very far with this one. For this year so far, in particular, the mix of formats represented by the albums I show therein started me thinking about addressing this topic, and picking up a flurry of new releases just in the last few months got me to wondering, if any of you out there have been wondering, what determines whether I buy a new release on CD or LP? And another more recent event, which is a change in my work routine that I talked about just recently, actually my first live stream 2 weeks ago, has made me think even more about this question just in the past week or so, or past few weeks actually. It is now. I didn't update these notes for a couple weeks. It turns out that about 2/3 of the new releases I've bought this year so far have been on CD. I'm not sure if it's simply because the criteria I'm about to break down just happens to have favored CD purchases, or if it's because I subconsciously knew I wasn't going to be near my turntable as much in the foreseeable future. Regardless, my longtime viewers know that I love and appreciate both the CD and vinyl formats equally. So surely at least some of you out there have been wondering, but just haven't bothered to ask. So I've decided to answer it preemptively for you, breaking down my reasoning in detail in approximate order of the factors I weigh most heavily to least heavily, what determines whether I buy a new release on CD or LP. Now, the first and most important factor is my purchase history with the artist. Basically, what I mean by that is how much of the artist's past discography I own and on which format. For instance, you'll notice I bought the latest albums by the Foo Fighters and Weezer on CD, and really that's just because that's the format on which I own all their previous albums. Consistency is a thing for me, and it'd be weird, to me anyway, to own just this one album on another format. It's probably silly to some of you guys, but that's the quasi-obsessive-compulsive side of me. That being said, the more spotty my accumulation of an artist's albums is, the more likely I might jump formats. The Offspring and G-Love are a couple of examples in the last year or so. But occasionally I'll just spontaneously make the transition, even if I have been a faithful and consistent buyer. Randall Brandlett is an example of this. I actually bought his most recent album on LP, and I decided to work my way backwards a couple albums. Like I bought the second most and third most recent ones on vinyl and actually swapped out the CDs for those. So there you go. But I still own everything before that on CD. So I'm kind of weird that way. I'm consistently inconsistent. Anyway, the second factor that determines what format I buy my new releases on, and this would actually be most people's number one issue, is the price tag. As we all know, LPs tend to be more expensive than CDs, and how much of a price difference there is does play a factor. And for me, that goes hand in hand with the simple matter of how much I feel like paying for an album by the artist in question. Now, usually when the LP and CD are within $5 of each other, it doesn't matter to me, but it can sometimes be a gap of more than $10, and that's when I'll start telling myself, the CD version will do, won't it? Obviously, with some artists, I simply must have the vinyl version regardless. So anyway, yes, it kind of follows a rule, but it depends, you know. The number three determining factor is the layout of the album, and what I mean by that is the vinyl version on 2 LPs or just one? This may be a silly consideration to some of you, but when I buy an album on vinyl and find out that it's spread over 2 LPs when it could have easily fit on just one, it bothers me a little bit. Not so much because of its price, although double LPs are usually more expensive than single LPs, but because it can impede the flow of the album and be just plain annoying if I have to get up to change the record 3 times instead of just once. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the interactive nature of the vinyl experience, having to flip the record halfway through, but as they say, too much of anything isn't necessarily a good thing. Of course, if it's a longer album that's worthy of being broken up into 4 sides, or flat out needs to be broken up into 4 sides, that's another matter entirely. Because sometimes I only want to listen to, say, half the album in one sitting. Except when it's one of those way too long self-indulgent albums by one of those self-important artists. And we've had a lot of those in the last couple of years, although I think this year it seems to have tapered off a bit, artists making unnecessarily long albums. Excuse me. I need to remain hydrated. One moment, please. One moment, please. There we go. Okay, the number 4 factor in my decision making is the packaging. Now, if I'm indifferent to choosing between the LP and the CD, or if I'm leaning toward choosing the CD, it'll probably come down to whether the CD comes in a plastic jewel case, a digipack with a tray, or a digisleeve, which is the digipack without a tray. I consider a digisleeve to be no better than a record jacket. In fact, it's usually a little bit worse because there's almost never an inner sleeve to guard the CD from scratches. So if there's neither a tray to hold the CD nor an inner sleeve to protect it, I'm most likely to go for the vinyl. Number 5 on my list is the album's availability and my patience for it. Sometimes an album isn't released in both formats right away. For some dumb reason, whether it's marketing strategy or manufacturing delay, the LP won't drop until weeks and sometimes months after the CD. If I'm really anxious to get the album, even if I'd rather have it on vinyl, my impatience might get the better of me and I'll just buy the CD because it's there. So sometimes it's, one of those, the more mundane, I guess you'd say, decisions than the more not mundane ones. Yes. Vocabulary is escaping me right now. Anyway, my 6th and final decision maker is bonus tracks. Now, the reason it's number 6, the last on the list, is because it's not as much of a factor as it used to be, since in recent years I've come to appreciate more modest album runtimes and not usually care about those extra songs. But if I like an artist enough that I'd like to have the 2 or 3 bonus tracks, or occasionally an entire bonus disc, that I could get from a Target exclusive, a Japanese issue, or some other source, it can be enough to flip me to the CD side. And this, incidentally, is the only reason why I own both of Niall Horan's albums on CD instead of LP. So anyway, yeah, those are basically the reasons. But what about cassettes, you might ask? I'm talking about LPs and CDs, and I've talked about a more recent, newly refound fondness for cassettes. So you might be asking, what about cassettes? Now, artists are gradually releasing more and more of their new releases on cassette, after all. But I'm sorry to tell my cassette fans out there that I don't even consider that format as my first purchase for a new release. Now, if I end up becoming especially fond of an album, I won't rule out picking up the cassette later on if money permits, but it would be more for the novelty of it than for everyday listening. So that's why I basically rule out cassettes in terms of new releases. At least that's how I feel about it now. Let's not forget, as recently as a year ago, I never imagined I'd ever take a second look at cassettes. So there you go. Yeah. And so yeah. Hey, Funko Boys, how you doing? Glad to have you here. So yes, I hope you guys have enjoyed this. But oh yeah, I wanted to make a little footnote on this, my decision making for buying new releases. And yes, it is because of the fact that my work situation has changed. The reason I got so much more into new releases on vinyl, well, one of the reasons was because I don't know if I'd say I was taking for granted, but definitely was appreciating or wanted to appreciate as much as I could how much time I was spending at home with my turntable like 15 feet away from me. So yeah, basically I was working from home. I could put a record on anytime I wanted to. And so yes, that's one of the several allures that the vinyl has held for me. But now that I'm working at the office more, I've got I can, with CDs, something you can't do with LPs, but you can do with CDs is you can rip them onto your computer and put them onto a music player in MP3 format. So that is, I've kind of gotten a bit more back into CDs than I used to. I'm regaining an appreciation for CDs. Yes, they have their flaws. They're not as interactive in a tactile form as vinyl is, but CDs have their advantages. They definitely do. And yes, that's one reason why I've been buying more CDs this year than LPs. But the tide may turn again. Who knows? So yeah, I guess that's about all I have to say about that. So anybody have any questions, comments, requests? I don't know if I'll be able to fulfill them in a live setting or not, but excuse me, I got to take a drink here. Yes, I might be shooting myself in the foot by having tackled two topics in the same video, because I was going to put the LP versus CD thing in its own video, but then, I mean, look at how much time this live stream has taken up. That video would have been, 10 minutes into the topic, and I would have been done and not know what to do with the rest of the hour. So this was a way to kind of stretch out this time. It's still not going to be a full hour. I'm getting kind of tired, and we're going to hit the road pretty early tomorrow for our trip, so I might want to, just in the best interest of getting plenty of sleep, signing off for now. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Actually, hang on one second, sorry. Yay, preparedness. Yes, hopefully, well, I keep saying hopefully next week, but as I said, it's the lighting for the green screen thing that I'm still not sure about. I want to take some time, maybe this Sunday, I'll take some time to fiddle around with the, where is that darn file? There we go. Sorry. Maybe I will take time to experiment with OBS and try to spruce up my live streams a bit more. But we will definitely see. After all, as I've mentioned before, and when starting these live streams, having the me time on the weekend to just kind of sit back and chill and let my brain turn off has been very valuable to me. That's why I am totally digging this live stream format. I am loving it. I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. But anyway, yes, I guess that'll do it. Enough rambling. That's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, hit that like button and share it with your friends. And give me your thoughts, questions, suggestions, or constructive criticisms. criticisms in the comment section below. Also, scroll down to the description for the links to my Twitter and Instagram feeds and links to my favorite fellow YouTubers who are all worth checking out. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet, and browse my past videos. And be sure to ring that notifications bell so you'll be the first to know each time I drop a new video. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. And remember, life's too short to be a music snob.